Snow powders the long driveway of Stanford Vineyards, turning every tire track into a scar that the wind tries to erase. Ella Stanford stands under the portico, fingers numb around a paper cup of coffee that tastes like smoke and regret. Inside, the tasting hall glows with Christmas lights, but the laughter is thin, measured, and sharp enough to cut. She tells herself she is here for closure, not inheritance, not family applause, not the old ache she keeps buried under work. The lawyer arrives with a leather briefcase and a face trained to look calm in storms. Reporters slip in behind the relatives, drawn by a rumor that the Stanford fortune has a twist. Ella feels the first flash of anger when she sees her uncle Richard Stanford already holding court near the fireplace. Richard raises his glass toward her like a king greeting a subject. "There she is," Richard says, voice warm as poisoned honey, "our precious granddaughter, ready to sign away her youth to save a vineyard." "Save your performance," Ella says, forcing steadiness. "I came to hear what Grandpa wanted, not what you want." Richard smiles wider, as if she has given him permission to sharpen his claws. A shadow moves at the edge of her sight, and her breath catches before she understands why. Eli Thorne stands near the back wall, coat still dusted with snow, dark hair damp from the cold, eyes fixed on her with a restraint that hurts to see. 8 years vanish in a heartbeat, replaced by a boy in a borrowed sweater, and the way he used to laugh with his mouth covered, as if joy was something to hide. Ella swallows and remembers the last day she saw him, the sudden suitcase, the slammed car door, and a goodbye that never came. "Eli," she says, and her voice breaks on the name she has not spoken aloud in years. He nods once, like a man who has trained himself not to reach for what he wants. "Ella," he says, quiet, and the room tilts like the floorboards have been pulled from under her. The lawyer clears his throat, and the family gathers, pretending the air is not vibrating with old history. Hank, the estate butler, moves with careful grace, placing chairs, offering water, keeping his gaze respectfully lowered. Ella catches the flicker of something in Hank's face when he looks at Eli, a mix of guilt and relief. That alone tells her tonight will not be simple. The lawyer opens the briefcase and sets a sealed envelope on the table. "This is the final will of Arthur Stanford," the lawyer says, "to be read in full tonight, as instructed." Richard's ringed hand taps the arm of his chair, impatient, already counting money that is not his yet. The lawyer reads the opening lines, the usual list of properties, trusts, and charitable bequests. Ella hears her grandfather's voice in her head, gentle but unyielding. Then the lawyer turns a page, and the temperature in the room drops. "To my granddaughter Ella Stanford, and to my godson's grandson Eli Thorne," the lawyer reads, "I leave the controlling share of Stanford Vineyards, to be managed jointly, effective immediately." A wave of murmurs crashes through the relatives. Richard's smile freezes, then fractures. "Jointly?" Richard barks, slamming his palm on the table. He is not even blood. Cameras click, hungry for a headline. Ella turns to Eli, her mind scrambling, her heart slamming against her ribs like it wants out. Eli's jaw tightens, but he does not look surprised. He looks like a man who has been living with this sentence for a long time. The lawyer continues, voice steady, reading words that land like thunder. "If Ella and Eli do not meet one of the following conditions within 12 months, the lawyer says, then my controlling share shall be placed in a trust, and all profits shall be donated to the Arthur Stanford Foundation for Community Relief. Condition 1. A formal engagement, with intent to marry, recognized by the trust board. Condition 2. A verified plan that increases the winery's net profitability by 100% within the same period." The room erupts. "This is insane," someone snaps. "He is her cousin," a woman whispers, loud enough for microphones. Ella's face burns. She stands so fast her chair scrapes the floor. "What kind of trap is this?" Ella demands, staring at the lawyer. "Grandpa would never force an engagement." "Your grandfather insisted," the lawyer says softly, "and he left additional instructions for you both." He places 2 letters on the table, each in Arthur Stanford's distinct handwriting. Ella reaches for hers with shaking fingers. Across the table, Eli picks up his, and his knuckles turn white. Before she can open it, Richard lunges forward. "You want to hand our legacy to a stranger?" Richard snarls at the lawyer, then swivels toward Eli. "You show up after 8 years, and suddenly you own half our vineyard." "I did not ask for this," Eli says, his voice controlled, "and I am not here for your approval." "Then why are you here?" Ella blurts, the question ripping out of her before she can stop it. "For the money?" Eli looks at her like that question is a knife he has been expecting, and still cannot dodge. "I came back," he says, "because there are things that were stolen, and people who were hurt." His gaze holds hers, steady and raw. And I came back, he adds, lower, to protect what I should have protected a long time ago. Ella's throat tightens, and the room spins with whispers. Richard steps closer, voice rising for the cameras. Listen up, Richard announces. The public deserves to know whether the Stanford heiress is planning to marry her own cousin to keep her fortune. Reporters lift microphones, hungry for scandal. Ella's body moves before her brain catches up. She marches to Eli, stops inches from him, and jabs a finger at his chest. You do not get to walk back into my life and pretend you are a hero, she says, voice shaking. You vanished, and I had to grow up in this place alone. Eli does not flinch. I know, he says, and I am sorry. The simple apology cracks something inside her. She turns away before anyone can see the tears threatening to spill. Hank steps beside her, quietly placing a hand near her elbow without touching. Miss Ella, Hank murmurs, your grandfather asked me to help you both, if things got ugly. Ugly is an understatement. Outside, the snow thickens, and the vineyard looks like a painting someone keeps trying to ruin. Inside, Ella opens her letter with a snap, as if tearing paper will keep her from tearing apart. Arthur's handwriting fills the page. My dear Ella, the letter begins, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I have left you one final lesson. Her vision blurs, and she forces herself to keep going. This vineyard is not only land and barrels and money, the letter says, it is the story of promises kept, and promises broken. You will be tempted to let family politics drown you, Arthur writes, and you will be tempted to blame Eli for what happened. Ella's heart stutters. Do not, the letter continues, because Eli was a child caught in a war he did not start. She looks up, startled, and meets Hank's troubled gaze. Across the room, Eli reads his letter, face stiff, lips pressed into a line. Richard is still shouting at the lawyer, but the lawyer refuses to move. Arthur's letter ends with a sentence that feels like a match tossed into gasoline. Trust Eli, her grandfather wrote, and if you cannot, then trust the truth you will uncover together. Ella folds the letter, hands trembling. Trust is a luxury she does not have tonight. Richard's voice cuts through the chaos. Fine, he says, loud and theatrical, let the children play house. I will see you both at the next board meeting, where adults handle real business. He points at Eli. And you, he adds, keep your hands off my niece. Ella whips around. I am not your property, she says, and I am not your pawn. Richard laughs. We will see, he says, and the smile he gives her is the same smile she has feared since she was 16. The family disperses into small clusters, whispering, texting, calling friends who will trade secrets for clicks. By midnight, the headline is already spreading. Stanford heiress forced into cousin engagement, or vineyard donated. Ella slams her phone down when she sees it. This is a nightmare, she says, voice hoarse. Eli steps closer, careful, as if approaching a skittish animal. It does not have to be, he says. Do not tell me what it has to be, Ella snaps, then immediately regrets the sharpness because his eyes flicker with pain. Hank clears his throat, giving them both a way to breathe. Your grandfather also instructed that you both reside on the property for the next 3 months, Hank says, to oversee operations during the holiday season and the quarterly audit. He what? Ella says, disbelief cracking through exhaustion. Eli's mouth twitches, a ghost of a smile that does not reach his eyes. He never did things halfway, Eli says. Ella looks at the grand staircase, at the portraits, at the heavy curtains, and she feels like the house is swallowing her. She looks back at Eli. If you are here to take from me again, she says quietly, I will destroy you. Eli's expression softens, and that softness scares her more than anger. If I take anything, he says, it will only be the blame that should have been mine to carry. The snow outside keeps falling, and Ella realizes she is trapped under the same roof as the boy she loved, and the man she never stopped missing. Morning comes gray and heavy, the kind of light that makes every object look like it is holding its breath. Ella walks the vineyard rows with a clipboard, pretending numbers can keep her emotions in line. Behind her, Eli follows at a respectful distance, hands in his pockets, boots crunching through snow. You still keep your notes in neat columns, he says, trying for normal. And you still talk like you have a right to comment, Ella replies, not looking at him. They reach the crush pad, where the tanks sit like silent metal giants. Ella points at the most recent production report. We are down 19% from last year, she says, and our top 3 restaurant accounts are shaky. Because Richard has been calling them, Eli says, matter of fact, and telling them the vineyard will be tied up in scandal. Ella's head snaps up. How do you know that? Because one of them called me last night, Eli says, and asked if the rumor was true. She hates the way he says it, like he has been taking hits meant for her. She hates more that part of her is grateful. And what did you tell them? I told them the winery is bigger than gossip, Eli says, and that we are doing a winter release event with a limited reserve. Ella's eyes narrow. We are not doing that, she says. We could, Eli says, if we adjust the blend and lean into the holiday market. He steps closer, pointing at her clipboard without touching it. Your grandfather used to say you could taste the weather in your wine, Eli adds, and he was right. Your palate is the backbone of this place. Ella's chest tightens at the mention of her grandfather. Stop, she says, voice rough, do not talk about him like you were here. Eli flinches, then nods. You are right, he says, I was not here, and that is my fault. She turns away, furious at herself for wanting to ask why. Back in the main house, Hank serves breakfast in the kitchen, not the formal dining room. The choice is deliberate, a reminder of childhood mornings when the house felt like home. Ella sits at the island, staring at a mug of tea. Eli stands across from her, hands braced on the counter, looking like he has not slept. We need a plan, Hank says, placing plates down, before Richard poisons the board against you. We do not have time, Ella says, and we do not have the luxury of pretending the press will be kind. Eli glances at Hank. Can you get me access to the old ledgers? Eli asks. Hank pauses, then nods once. Yes, Hank says, but those ledgers are locked for a reason. I need to know why I was sent away, Eli says, voice low, and I need proof of what Richard did. Ella's stomach twists. You keep saying he did something, she says, but you have no evidence. Not yet, Eli says, but I will. She hates the certainty in his tone because it sounds like hope. That afternoon, Richard storms into the office building on the edge of the vineyard, flanked by 2 assistants. Ella is in the middle of a staff meeting, trying to calm anxious workers. This is not a kindergarten, Richard says, barging in, and you are not fit to run this place. The room goes silent. Ella stands. Get out, she says, voice steady. Make me, Richard replies, then smirks at Eli, who is leaning against the doorway. You, Richard says, I have not forgotten you, boy. I hope you enjoy your stolen seat at the table. Eli's voice is calm, and that calm feels dangerous. It is not stolen, Eli says, it was given, and that scares you. Richard laughs loudly for the staff. You think you can charm them with a sad story? Richard says, tell them what you really are, Eli. Tell them you are the reason Arthur's partner died. Ella's blood turns cold. Eli's face does not change, but his eyes darken. That is a lie, Eli says. Is it? Richard says, stepping closer, I have a file that says your father was a fraud. Ella's hands clench. You will not weaponize dead people in front of my staff, she says, leave now. Richard's gaze slides to her, calculating. Fine, he says, but do not forget, the board can remove you, and the press can ruin you. He turns to the room. Ask yourselves, Richard calls, how long you want to work for a scandal. He leaves, coat flaring like a cape, satisfied with the chaos he planted. Ella exhales slowly. A young cellar worker bites his lip, eyes wide. Miss Stanford, he says, are we going to lose our jobs? Ella forces a smile. Not if I can help it, she says, and I did not come this far to let fear win. After the meeting, Eli follows her into the corridor. You did not have to defend me, he says. I defended the truth, Ella replies, then hesitates, and the people who rely on this place. Eli's gaze lingers on her face. You always did that, he says, even when you were 16. Ella swallows hard. Stop bringing up 16, she says, it makes me want to throw you into a snowbank. Eli's mouth curves, small and real. If it helps, he says, I will volunteer. The moment almost feels light, and that frightens her. That night, Ella works in the barrel room, sampling, adjusting, taking notes. Eli comes in quietly, carrying a stack of old ledgers. He sets them down, and the dust rises like ghosts. Hank let you have them? Ella asks. He trusts me, Eli says, then adds, or he trusts your grandfather's instructions. They sit at a small table between rows of oak barrels. Eli flips through pages filled with neat handwriting and numbers. Your grandfather's partner was named Daniel Thorne, Eli says, voice careful, my grandfather. Ella's chest tightens. I remember him, she says, Grandpa used to talk about him like he was family. Eli nods. They built this place together, he says, then something happened, and Daniel left, and my father died with that stain on his name. Ella looks down at her hands. Why did Grandpa never tell me, she whispers. Because Richard was listening, Eli says, and because secrets were the only shield he had left. Silence stretches, filled with the smell of wood and wine and winter. Ella reaches for a sample glass, but her hand slips. Red wine spills across the table, dark and sudden. Eli's reflexes kick in. He reaches out, catching her wrist before she can jerk away, guiding her hand away from the spill. Their fingers brush, and heat flashes through Ella's skin. She freezes. Eli freezes too, as if he is holding a live wire. "Sorry," he says quickly, letting go. "I did not mean to." Ella pulls her hand back, heart hammering. "We cannot," she says, breathless. "We are family, at least on paper." Eli's gaze drops to the wine stain spreading like a bruise. "On paper," he repeats, voice low, "but paper can lie." Ella's throat tightens. "Do not say things like that," she whispers, "it is dangerous." Eli lifts his eyes, and the longing there makes her want to run and stay at the same time. "You think I do not know?" he asks softly. "I have lived with that danger since I was a teenager." Ella's eyes burn. "Then why did you leave?" she demands, anger returning. "Because it is easier than sadness." Eli leans back, jaw tightening. "Because your grandfather told me I had to," he says, "and because Richard made it clear what would happen if I stayed." Ella stares. "What would happen?" Eli's voice drops. "He threatened to ruin Daniel's name forever," he says, "and to take the vineyard from Arthur, and to make you collateral." Ella's stomach twists. "And you believed him?" "I watched him do it," Eli says, "to other people. I was young, and I did not have money or power, and leaving was the only move that kept you safe." Ella presses a hand to her mouth. For a second, she sees him at 18, alone, forced into exile to protect her. She hates that the image makes her want to cry. Hank appears in the doorway, silent, carrying a small wooden box. "I hoped you two would find your way down here," Hank says. He sets the box on the table. "Arthur wanted you to have this when you were ready," Hank adds, "and I think you are." Ella opens the box, breath catching. Inside is a folded letter, a key, and a worn photograph of Arthur and Daniel standing in the vineyard, smiling like brothers. Ella touches the photo gently. "Where is this key for?" she asks. "The attic safe," Hank says, voice heavy, "and what is inside will change everything. The attic smells like cedar and cold dust." Ella holds the flashlight, while Eli unlocks the safe with the key from the box. The latch clicks, and the door swings open. Inside are documents wrapped in cloth, and another letter sealed. Eli's hands tremble as he breaks the seal. He reads in silence, then his breath catches. "What is it?" Ella asks, voice shaking. Eli looks at her, eyes wet, and that alone breaks her. "Arthur says Daniel was not my grandfather by blood," Eli says, swallowing. "Daniel adopted my father after my father's parents died." Ella's heart stutters. "So you are not related to Arthur," she whispers. Eli shakes his head. "No," he says, "and Arthur was never related to Daniel either. They were brothers by choice." Ella's knees feel weak. Relief floods her, too fast, too bright, followed immediately by guilt for feeling relieved. Eli continues reading, voice rough. "Arthur says Richard faked a report years ago," Eli says, "to suggest I was family by blood, and he used that lie to keep me out of the inheritance." Ella clenches her jaw. "He made us think we were cousins," she says, furious, "so we would never cross the line." Eli's gaze holds hers. "He did it because he knew what we felt," Eli says quietly, "and he wanted to control it." Ella's throat tightens. "He does not get to control my life," she says, voice fierce. They return to the main house with the documents, hearts pounding with the kind of truth that can set you free or burn you alive. The next morning, Richard's assistant leaks a file to the press. A blurred image of Ella and Eli in the barrel room, their hands too close, wine stain on the table like evidence. The caption is cruel. "Stanford heiress caught with cousin in secret midnight meeting." Ella slams her laptop shut, shaking. "He is trying to trap us," she says. Eli's eyes harden. "Let him try," he says. "We will break his trap." They call an emergency meeting with the winery staff, then the board. Richard arrives late, smug, surrounded by allies. "I am concerned," Richard says, "about the reputation risk you have created." Ella slides a packet of documents across the table. "I am concerned," she replies, "about fraud, embezzlement, and sabotage." Richard's smile flickers. "That is a big accusation," he says, "from a girl in over her head." Eli stands. "Then let us talk about numbers," Eli says, voice even, "because numbers do not care about your charm." He clicks a remote, and the screen lights up with charts, contracts, and transaction records. Gasps ripple around the boardroom. Ella watches Richard's face as evidence piles up. Offshore accounts. Unauthorized transfers. A contract signed to sell vineyard parcels to a shell company. Richard laughs, too loud. Fabricated, he says. But his eyes dart to the door, calculating exits. Eli changes the slide. An audio waveform appears, then Richard's voice fills the room. We push them into scandal. The recording says in Richard's unmistakable tone, and when they crack, we take the vineyard clean. Silence slams down. A board member coughs pale. Richard, she whispers, is that you? Richard's mouth opens, then closes. He glares at Eli. You think this wins you the girl, and the vineyard, he spits. Ella's hands curl into fists. It wins the vineyard back from you, she says, and I do not belong to anyone. The board votes, rapid and unanimous. Richard is removed from his seat, escorted out by security staff who look relieved to finally stop pretending. As he passes Ella, he leans close, voice low. You will regret this, he hisses, the world will still see you as a scandal. Ella meets his gaze, steady. Then the world can learn to see better, she says. When the doors close behind him, Ella's legs threaten to give out. Eli steadies her, not touching, only hovering a hand near her back. You did it, he says, quiet. We did it, Ella replies, breath shaky. That night, the staff throws a small celebration in the tasting hall. Someone plays old Christmas songs, and someone else hangs more lights, as if brightness can be rebuilt one bulb at a time. Ella stands with a glass of reserve red wine, watching the employees laugh again. Eli approaches, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. You used to hate cocoa, Ella says. I did, Eli admits, but it is better than pretending I am not cold. She takes a mug, their fingers brushing, and neither of them pulls away this time. Eli's gaze drops to her lips, then returns to her eyes with visible restraint. I should not, he says, voice rough, not until everything is clean. Everything is never clean, Ella says, heart pounding, and I am tired of living like my life belongs to other people. Eli exhales, like he has been holding his breath for 8 years. Tell me to stop, he whispers. Ella does not. Instead, she steps closer, feeling the heat between them like a furnace. But before anything happens, Hank clears his throat from behind them. Sorry to interrupt, Hank says gently, but the press is outside again, and they are asking questions. The celebration dims, reality barging in. Ella's shoulders tense. Let them ask, Eli says, setting his mug down. We will answer with truth. The next day, they invite reporters for a guided tour. Ella walks through the vineyard, explaining the winter pruning, the soil, the barrels, the work no scandal can erase. Eli stands beside her, answering business questions, offering contracts, speaking with a calm authority that makes people listen. A reporter pushes forward, microphone raised. Are you two engaged? She asks, eyes bright with hunger. Ella's pulse spikes. Eli glances at her, giving her the choice, always the choice. Ella lifts her chin. We are co-managing the vineyard, she says, and we will not allow lies to define us. The reporter persists. But you are cousins, right? Ella's jaw tightens. Eli steps in, voice firm. No, he says, and we have documentation to prove it. The cousin label was a lie used to control our family. Murmurs ripple. Cameras tilt, capturing Ella's face, her steady posture, her refusal to shrink. That night, Ella finds Eli in the library, surrounded by papers. He looks up as she enters, eyes tired. I keep thinking about the boy who left, Ella says softly, and I hate him, and I miss him, and I do not know how to hold both. Eli swallows. You do not have to forgive me quickly, he says, but I want the chance to earn it. Ella steps closer, stopping beside the desk. Then start by telling me everything, she says, no more half-truths. Eli nods, voice low, as if confession is a painful ritual. Richard confronted me when I was 18, he begins. Right after Daniel died, and right after Arthur tried to pull me into the business. Richard told me if I stayed, he would destroy Arthur publicly, Eli continues, and he would ruin you by tying your name to mine in the ugliest way. Ella's eyes sting. So you left to protect me, she says, bitter and grateful at once. I left because I was terrified, Eli admits, and because I thought absence was safer than letting you love me, and paying the price. Ella's breath catches. You thought I loved you, she asks, voice shaking. Eli's gaze locks on hers. I knew, he says, because I loved you first, and I tried to bury it, and it still grew. The confession hits her like warm light after years of cold. Ella leans on the desk, fingers digging into wood. I was 16, she whispers, and I wrote your name in the margins of my notebooks like it was a prayer. Eli's face softens with pain. And I was a coward, he says, because I let you think you were alone. Ella laughs once, sharp and wet. You were not the only coward, she says. I never told you either. Eli stands slowly, moving around the desk. He stops close enough that Ella can feel his warmth. Can I, he asks, voice gentle, touch your hand? The question nearly breaks her. Yes, she whispers. Eli reaches out, careful, and takes her hand like it is something sacred. His thumb brushes her knuckles, slow and reverent. Ella's eyes close, and she lets herself breathe. Outside, the wind howls, but inside, something fragile begins to heal. Days pass in a blur of work. They redesign the holiday tasting packages. Ella perfects a new winter blend with notes of blackberry and spice. Eli secures a partnership with a luxury hotel chain that wants exclusive bottles for New Year's Eve. The profitability projections climb, not by magic, but by effort and stubborn faith. Still, the internet is cruel. Anonymous accounts accuse them of staging a lie. Protesters appear at the gate, holding signs, shouting insults. Ella watches from the window, hands trembling. I cannot breathe, she whispers. Eli stands behind her. Then do not face it alone, he says. He steps outside with her, into the snow, into the noise. A man shouts. Shame on you. Ella's face burns, but she keeps walking. Eli stops at the gate and raises his voice, calm but loud enough to carry. This vineyard employs people from this community, he says, and we will not let lies cost them their livelihoods. You want truth, Eli continues, then ask for records, not rumors. We will provide them. Some protesters pause, uncertain. A woman near the front lowers her sign slightly. Ella steps forward, voice shaking but clear. My grandfather built this place on honesty, she says, and I will not let anyone weaponize my family to steal from my workers. The crowd's energy shifts, not fully softened, but less vicious. That night, Hank brings Ella a small folder. This is the last piece, Hank says, voice quiet. Arthur asked me to keep it until you both had proof enough to stand on. Ella opens it. Inside is a notarized statement from Daniel, written years ago, naming Richard as the man who orchestrated the fraud that killed his partnership. Ella's hands shake. This could have saved us years ago, she whispers. Hank's eyes glisten. Arthur feared Richard would destroy you if he played his hand too soon, Hank says. So he waited, and he planned, and he trusted you two to finish it. Ella presses the folder to her chest, grief and gratitude colliding. On Christmas Eve, the vineyard is bright with light and sound. Employees sing carols near the big tree in the courtyard. Snow falls in thick, soft sheets, turning the world into quiet magic. Ella walks through the crowd with a smile that feels like it belongs to someone stronger. Eli waits near the old grapevine trellis, the one they used to climb as kids. He looks nervous, and that is new. Ella steps closer, snow crunching under her boots. You look like you are about to negotiate with a bank, she says, trying to lighten the moment. Eli exhales a shaky laugh. This is worse, he admits. Banks do not hold my heart in their hands. Ella's breath catches. Eli, she whispers, do not say things like that unless you mean them. Eli reaches into his coat pocket. He pulls out a small ring made from woven grapevine, simple and beautiful. He drops to one knee in the snow. The world goes silent around them, as if the vineyard itself is listening. Ella Stanford, Eli says, voice rough with emotion, 8 years ago I left, because I thought I had to earn the right to stand beside you. I came back because I refused to let fear dictate our lives, he continues, and because the truth is finally in our hands. He holds up the ring, eyes shining. I have loved you since we were teenagers, he says, and I do not want to bury it anymore. Will you marry me? Tears blur Ella's vision. She laughs through them, the sound bright and real. Yes, she says, then shakes her head, then says it louder, yes. Eli stands, hands trembling, and slides the ring onto her finger. He cups her face, careful, giving her another choice, always the choice. Can I kiss you, he asks, voice barely a whisper. Ella nods. Kiss me, she says, and she leans into him. Their kiss is warm in the cold, soft and urgent, like a promise finally kept. Cheers erupt around them. Employees clap, laughing, crying, throwing arms around each other. Hank watches from the edge of the crowd, eyes wet, lips curved in quiet relief. For a moment, the vineyard feels like home again. Later, under the lights, Ella and Eli stand on the porch, wrapped in blankets, hands intertwined. Do you think the world will forgive us? Ella asks, staring at the snow drifting through light. Eli squeezes her hand. The world does not have to, he says, because we are not asking permission to be honest. Ella leans her head on his shoulder. I spent years afraid of what people would think, she admits, and I did not realize I was giving them my life piece by piece. Eli's voice is gentle. You do not have to do that anymore, he says. We will guard each other now. Midnight bells from a distant church drift through the snow. Ella looks out over the vineyard rows, dark lines under white, future waiting in silence. We still have the profitability condition, she says, practical even in joy, and the trust board will not be sentimental. Eli laughs softly. Then we will win with love and spreadsheets, he says. Ella laughs, and the sound feels like sunlight. In the weeks that follow, they deliver. The winter release sells out. The hotel partnership expands. Old clients return, impressed by transparency, and the story of a family that chose truth over shame. Richard tries to resurface, posting vague threats online, but the evidence shuts him down. A judge signs off on the board's removal, and Richard's influence fades like a bad dream after dawn. One afternoon, Ella and Eli walk the vineyard again, this time without a clipboard, just hands and breath in cold air. Do you ever think about what we lost? Ella asks. Eli looks at her, eyes steady. Yes, he says, and I think about what we found. He stops, turning toward her. I cannot give you those 8 years back, he says, but I can give you every year I have left. Ella's throat tightens. Then do not waste them, she says, voice fierce, and do not disappear on me again. Eli lifts her hand, kisses her knuckles, slow. I am here, he says, and I am staying. Snow falls lightly, softer now, like the world has finally exhaled. Ella looks at the vineyard, at the lights in the tasting hall, at Hank waving from the doorway. She thinks of her grandfather, of the way he planned this with stubborn love. She thinks of the boy who left and the man who returned. She thinks of herself, no longer a pawn. And in the quiet glow of winter sun breaking through clouds, Ella realizes redemption can be as simple as telling the truth, and as hard as choosing it every day. The next morning, a black SUV appears at the gate, and Ella's stomach drops when she recognizes the driver. A woman steps out, expensive coat, sharp cheekbones, a lawyer's briefcase in her hand. Hank stiffens. That is Marjorie Lane, Hank mutters, Richard's attorney, and she does not come to drink wine. Marjorie walks straight into the office, heels clicking like a countdown. Miss Stanford, Marjorie says, smiling without warmth, Mr. Stanford is filing an injunction to freeze all executive decisions made under your joint management. Ella's grip tightens on the doorframe. On what grounds, she asks. Conflict of interest, Marjorie replies smoothly, the alleged relationship between co-heirs and the risk to brand reputation. Eli steps forward. Alleged, he repeats, voice flat, you are basing a legal move on gossip. Gossip moves markets, Marjorie says, unfazed, and investors follow perception. Ella forces herself to breathe. Tell Richard he is wasting his money, she says. We have documentation, and we will defend our management decisions. Marjorie tilts her head, studying Ella like prey. Your grandfather liked you, she says, but liking does not win lawsuits. She slides a thick packet onto the desk. Court date in 10 days, Marjorie adds, prepare yourselves. When she leaves, the room feels smaller. Ella sinks into a chair, palms sweating. 10 days, she whispers, we are barely holding operations together. Eli kneels beside her chair, eyes level with hers. Look at me, he says gently. Ella meets his gaze, and the steadiness there is a lifeline. We have the truth, Eli says, and we have the numbers. We will show the judge both. Ella's laugh is brittle. And what about the engagement condition, she asks, do we play that card? Or do we fight like it does not exist? Eli hesitates, then answers with honesty that stings. I will not use your heart as strategy, he says, if you do not want that. Ella looks away, blinking hard. I hate that this is happening, she says, and I hate that part of me wants to say yes just to end the noise. Eli's voice is quiet. Do not say yes to end the noise, he says, say yes only if it is what you want. That night, Ella cannot sleep. She wanders into the kitchen, finding Eli at the table with a laptop and a half-empty mug. You are still working, she asks. I am mapping cash flow, Eli says. Richard's sabotage left holes. If the court freezes us, we need a contingency. Ella sits across from him, watching his concentration. In the lamplight, he looks older than 26, like he has carried weight for too long. When you were gone, Ella says, voice small, I used to walk this kitchen at night and pretend you were in the next room. Eli's fingers pause over the keys. Ella, he murmurs, I did not know. You could have written, she says, bitterness creeping back. One letter, one sentence, anything. Eli's shoulders drop. I wrote, he admits, dozens. I never sent them because Richard had eyes everywhere, and because I thought silence was safer than a trail. Ella's chest aches. Show me, she says, surprising herself. Eli closes the laptop, stands, and walks upstairs. He returns with a battered notebook. He sets it in front of her, hands steady, eyes not. Ella opens it. Pages of handwritten letters fill the book, each one dated, each one ending with her name like a prayer. Her vision blurs. You kept them, she whispers. I kept everything, Eli says, voice rough, because I did not know how to let you go. Ella presses her fingertips to the paper, feeling the ridges of ink. Tears fall before she can stop them. I am so tired, she admits, tired of being strong in public and breaking in private. Eli steps closer, careful. Then let me be strong for you sometimes, he says. Ella nods, and he wraps his arms around her, firm and gentle, holding her like she is not a burden. She clings to him, shaking, and for the first time in years, she lets herself fall apart, while someone stays. In the days leading up to court, they work like a storm. Ella hosts tasting events for local businesses, turning skeptics into allies. Eli meets with accountants, lawyers, and distributors, building a clean paper trail that leaves no room for doubt. Hank pulls old files from storage, each document another brick in the wall they are building against Richard. On the 9th day, a rumor spreads that the judge has been bribed. Ella reads it online and feels panic claw at her throat. She finds Eli outside, chopping wood near the fire pit, anger in every swing. This is never going to end, Ella says, voice cracking. He will always find a way to poison things. Eli stops, breathing hard. He only wins if we start believing his story, Eli says. Ella shakes her head, tears threatening. I am terrified, she admits, not of losing money, but of losing this place, and losing you again. Eli drops the axe, steps close, and cups her face with both hands, no hesitation now. You will not lose me, he says, fierce, and you will not lose this place, not while I am standing. Ella's breath catches. Promise, she whispers. I promise, Eli says. Court day arrives with gray skies and slush on the sidewalks. Ella sits at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tight, while Richard sits across the aisle, smug behind his attorney. Marjorie Lane speaks first, painting Ella as reckless and Eli as opportunistic. They are entangled, Marjorie says, and their decisions are compromised by personal interest. Ella's stomach twists, but she keeps her chin high. Their attorney stands, calm. He presents the documents proving the false cousin label, the fraudulent reports, the embezzlement, the sabotage. Eli takes the stand. I returned because Arthur Stanford asked me to, Eli says, and because I intended to protect the vineyard and the people who depend on it. Did you intend to manipulate Miss Stanford into an engagement? Marjorie asks, sharp. Eli's gaze flicks to Ella, then back to the judge. No, Eli says, steady, I intended to give her the truth and let her choose. Ella's throat tightens. The judge asks a question that makes the whole courtroom hold its breath. Miss Stanford, the judge says, do you believe Mr. Thorne has acted in good faith? Ella stands. She looks at Richard, then at Eli, then at the judge. Yes, she says, voice clear, and I believe the person acting in bad faith is the one sitting across from me. Richard's face hardens. The judge rules quickly. The injunction is denied. Richard's jaw clenches as the gavel falls. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarm. Ella and Eli walk through the crowd together, shoulders squared. Are you engaged? Someone shouts. Ella's pulse races. Eli glances at her, waiting. Ella takes a breath, then speaks. We are not here to entertain scandal, she says. We are here to protect a legacy, and the people who built it. But do you love him? A reporter yells, cruelly direct. Ella's heart stutters. Eli's hand hovers near hers, never forcing. Ella looks straight into the cameras. I love the truth, she says, and I love this vineyard. If you want a fairy tale, write your own. The answer is imperfect, but it is hers. That night, back at the winery, Hank finds them in the barrel room again. Arthur would be proud, Hank says, voice thick, you faced the storm, and you did not bend. Ella's eyes burn. I still miss him, she admits. Hank nods. So do I, he says, but he left you something more than property. He left you a partner. Hank's gaze flicks to Eli, then back to Ella, gentle but pointed. Ella feels warmth rise in her chest, a fragile courage. After the holiday season ends, the vineyard does not fall quiet. It hums with new contracts and renewed trust. Ella and Eli hold staff meetings where no one is afraid to speak. They repair old equipment, reinvest in the land, and offer scholarships in Arthur's name. In early January, the trust board reviews their progress. Ella presents the wine, the numbers, and the story, not as a scandal, but as resilience. Eli presents the operational strategy, calm and detailed, refusing to hide behind charm. The board approves their plan, impressed by the profitability climb. The engagement condition becomes irrelevant, not because they avoided it, but because they outperformed it. One evening, weeks later, Ella and Eli sit by the fire with a stack of old photographs. They find one of the four of them, Arthur, Daniel, a young Hank, and two kids, Ella and Eli, muddy and smiling. "We were so happy," Ella says. Eli touches the photo gently. "We can be that again," he says, "not as kids, but as adults who chose each other." Ella smiles, the kind of smile that does not need permission. "Then choose me tomorrow too," she says, half teasing, half pleading. Eli's answer is immediate. "Always," he says. Outside, snow begins again, softer now. Inside, warmth holds. Ella realizes that sunlight does not always come after snow. Sometimes it arrives inside it, gentle and stubborn, refusing to leave. And for the first time since she was 16, Ella believes the future can be bright without costing her heart.
Thanks for watching. Follow for more romance stories.